Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can you please take your seats? We're about to get started. Good morning. Love all the energy. Welcome to the 12th Annual Washington Women Speak program. So delighted that you all could join us today on a sunny but brisk day here in Washington, D.C., and no Mother Nature snow today. So thank you for everyone that was very supportive in re-registering and joining our program for this morning. I'm Wendy Morton Huddleston, an executive sponsor for the Women at Grant Thornton Business Resource Group and Allies, and also a principal here with the firm. Just so delighted to have with us an amazing group of speakers today that you'll get acquainted with momentarily. But as we think about this morning and the purpose of today's theme, having a seat at the table, women in leadership, we want to think about how we're going to be sharing insights today that women need to run, not walk, to get that seat at the table, and to feel confident and empowered that they belong at that table. And not to worry if the table chairs do not have armrests that are nice and cushiony. You get there and you make it happen and have that impact. So you're in store for a great program this morning. And in reference to the Women at Grant Thornton, our core mission is the recruitment, retention, and advancement of women professionals. And so that is what we are committed to doing in reference to recent recognition of National Association of Female Executives as one of the best places for executive women. And so we pride ourselves in terms of debunking the status quo, because we aim for the status go and to go beyond in reference to gender parity. So we know it's a journey and looking forward to continuing to work with you all to help realize that aspiration. So any first timers and newcomers to the program this morning? Excellent, look at that. And for our virtual audience, which is also a first time this morning throughout the Grant Thornton U.S. member firm, we have about 10% of newcomers this morning. So turn to your left or right shoulder and say, welcome, you're in store for a great program, okay? And we started out with very humble beginnings. We're this morning about 400 in attendance, and we started out 12 years ago at Hotel Washington in Washington, D.C., in a small conference room with about 70 attendees. And so I like to say we started out as an acorn, and we've grown to a mighty oak tree. And it's because of you all that you keep coming back and spreading the word, and so happy to see a lot of our male supporters as well with us this morning. One of the things that we also want to look forward to today is the networking. And so after today's, in terms of the show flow, after today's program, we're going to spend another 30 minutes having networking opportunity to get further acquainted with the colleagues that you're here today to connect with and garner insights from. So our hashtag for today's event is hashtag GTWWS18 for those on social media. We also want to thank our sponsors, Great Breakfast to RSM, for sponsoring our breakfast. And also our 6th year sponsor is the Association of Government Accountants, and they've been with us the longest. And Association of Government Accountants is a member organization focused on thought leadership and certification and professional development. Over 15,000 members in 100 chapters. And so we're so delighted that AGA and their leadership, I see the DC chapter president, Salim Mawani, President-elect Milena Brookshire, and a host of others, a national, Mary Peterman. So thank you so much for your continued support. Other sponsors that we want to recognize today are on page 11 of your brochure, but RMA Associates, Diversity Women, Ex Helio, as well as the Washington Nationals, the Committee for Economic Development. They are here live tweeting in addition to Grant Thornton in reference to our marketing and media team. And so once again, thank you for all that you're doing to further support and augment the cost of today's program. And I'm just so delighted also in reference to this week, how we have just in our own way been paying tribute to the life and legacy of First Lady Barbara Bush. And we have a brief video that we want to share with you all this morning for some morning motivation.
For you, it has been said many times that you are a first lady who needed no training.
That's right.
Yeah. And I wonder, though, is there anything in life that really prepares you from the time you're a little girl growing up? Is there anything that prepares you for this position in life? I mean, what kind of training can prepare you for the role that you're now leading?
Well, I'm a great believer in, I think of you. Mm-hmm. I quote you a lot, but you said, I'm blessed, but I make my blessings. I think that's true, but I also think I'm blessed because I had a great mother and father. I really did. And I married the world's most unbelievably nice, caring man. I have good children, a lot of good friends. I had a good education. I didn't finish it, but what I had was good. I love life. I think you've got two choices in life. I think you can like what you do or dislike it. Mm-hmm. I choose to like it. Mm-hmm. And then I think if you have all of that, nothing worries you. You just do the best you can.
So isn't that awesome? So doing the best you can, and you'll hear a lot about doing the best you can and pursuing that seat at the table from our speakers, Rosie and Kim and Brianne, and you'll meet them in a few minutes. But doing the best you can, I definitely want to take this opportunity to recognize and salute many women in the audience. It's probably a half a dozen. They have on purple blazers, and they embody the Women Working Mother of the Year. And so they are sprinkled throughout the audience. If you see any of the women with the purple blazers, salute them and congratulate them, because they do a tremendous service to our culture and to our profession. And we're just so delighted that they have decided to wear their Hall of Fame purple jackets today. So at this time, I'm going to call up our DC Metro leader, Mr. Greg Wallach, to take us further in the program. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here, and I knew I was going to be following Wendy, and I was already kind of nervous about that because I know what a great speaker and a motivator Wendy is, and I had no idea I'd be following Oprah and Barbara Bush too. So, I'll do my best. Well, on behalf of Grant Thornton, I really want to welcome you to this event. I've been privileged to be able to be here at a Washington Women Speak event for most of the years of its existence, and I agree with Wendy, you're in for a delightful time. Celebrating diversity and inclusion is a big part of our culture at Grant Thornton. And culture is something that we take very seriously as a firm, and we do it intentionally. Some firms and some organizations sort of have the poster on the wall and stare at the poster on the wall and say, we're all about inspiration or collaboration or what have you. At Grant Thornton, we take a more personal approach and an intentional approach. And in meetings like this, we engage in what we call culture conversations, where a leader might get up and have a conversation, a personal conversation about what elements of our culture and our values mean to them. And that allows us, through stories and story sharing, to help to embody that culture. So I have an idea. Would you all like to engage in a culture conversation this morning in this group? Okay, let's do that. So what we typically do is introduce the topic, which I can do, and if you all, while I'm introducing it, can be thinking about a woman in leadership who's inspired you. And I'll give a description of some of the attributes that we have as part of our culture in Grant Thornton that we feel epitomizes leadership. And if you could think while I'm reading those, of turning to the person next to you, if you know them, say hello. If you don't know them, introduce yourself, and then describe for them in just about a minute this inspirational woman and what they mean to you. So we talk about culture in a framework that we call values, behaviors, and outcomes. And the idea is that certain values are supported by certain behaviors, and you would expect certain outcomes to come. So I'm going to read this information, be thinking about that inspirational woman, and get ready to turn to the person next to you and talk a little bit about that person who's inspired you. So the value that I chose is leadership. And to us, leadership is about building trust and making a difference. What are the behaviors we look for to support our value of leadership? Living our values, acting with integrity, encouraging, inspiring, and motivating each other, embrace challenges, and solve problems. So what do we expect would be the mindset or the outcome associated with living those values of leadership? Leadership is acknowledging what more we can do to make a difference. We can all be leaders, and it's everyone's responsibility to lead. As leaders, our behaviors must be energetic to inspire and motivate others to have a deeper commitment to each other, our team and organization, to have higher levels of accountability, and to be part of our entire culture movement to becoming a healthy, high-performance organization. So think about someone who might have embodied that for you, and just spend a minute, introduce yourself to the person next to you, and describe that person to the person next to you. Okay. Let's go ahead and wrap up our conversations. We'll go ahead and wrap up our conversations. All right. I didn't want that to stop. I love the level of energy in the room, and I got a sense that folks were just getting excited talking about people who may have inspired them. Does anybody have the fortune of having the person you were talking about here in the room today? A couple of us. Me too. So the person that I was thinking about, and I was taking a couple of notes myself, is Wendy Morton Huddleston. I really value the relationship that Wendy and I have on a professional basis, a personal basis, and I've seen Wendy develop and grow over the years, and we've developed and grown as leaders together. Her poise, her confidence, things that she works on, I know, hard. Her determination, not everything has gone the way Wendy wants all the time, and I see her, that just toughens her, and I've seen her get stronger and stronger. And I would say one of her greatest attributes is her support of others and her ability to build a team around her. And I see several folks nodding their heads here who have benefited from that, as I have myself. And I think that this event is really a reflection of Wendy's personality and her team, and just her great spirit and leader as a woman. So thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you. One of the other things I really value about Washington Women Speak is the transparency and even vulnerability of some of the guests we've had over the years. I think back to a general in the U.S. Coast Guard saying, "You can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time." And maybe some of you remember that conversation. Or a senior official in the government, African-American female leader, who said, I didn't really ever feel like I had anything stand in my way, except I started my life very much overweight and had to overcome some weight issues, which was a big revelation and a learning point for a lot of us in a different room. So I'll share a little bit about Thornton and the journey that we're continuing to be on to enhance diversity within our team. Frankly, when we hire out of college and experienced hire folks, we tend to hire in about 50-50 ratio, women to men. What we find is as folks get on to the more senior levels, the ratio drops to about 1 in 10. 1 in 10. That's surprising, I think, to all of us who know that information. And we're active, right? I think we're active. We're active in having culture conversations. We're active in events like this. And yet something isn't quite working. And we've actually hired in a third party to help us study this and give us some best practices and ideas. And one thing that I've learned in being an ally to various resource groups over the last few years, including Women at Grant Thornton, is being an ally or being a participant is somewhat passive. Being an advocate, and it's implied in the word itself, an advocate is someone who's vocal, someone who is listening actively and then taking that information and sharing that with others so that those insights can be shared and acted upon. And I'd encourage you all to be vocal advocates as we're listening today and we're coming out of this session. As a leader here in the Washington, D.C. area, I very much want to encourage and promote women executives, that seat at the table in our organization. And we're not there yet. And we're looking for creative ideas on how to do that. So I appreciate your willingness to engage in that dialogue and maybe even be a vocal advocate. We're going to play a video with some of the leaders here you might recognize in the room with some of their ideas about women in the workplace and how to support and advocate for them. So if we could play that video.
Women at the table, speaking their minds, helping to lead our company forward. I think it's essential.
To be able to share their ideas, to influence, to help set strategic vision.
That theme means everything to me because I believe that an organization can only truly be successful when you have diversity of thought, gender, and perspective at the table, and that includes women. And I also believe, because it has worked for me, that as a female and as a woman at the table, it's really your obligation to bring another woman to the table with you.
It means that hard work and determination trumps gender and status.
I look at who's at the table and who's not at the table because who are we missing? Who can add a different perspective to it to make sure that we're solving the whole problem?
To be willing to take the stretch opportunity when it presents itself and not let somebody who hasn't even arrived take that seat from us.
Women and others in the workforce speaking up and pointing out when you notice there's a lack of diversity on your team.
The first thing that makes me think of is my daughters. I think it's exciting because I get to be a part of something that can help shape new opportunities for them as they grow and move on into their careers.
To me, that indicates voices being heard.
That you're a key architect of what the table looks like, what we're serving, and how successful we're going to be when we're all at the same table at the same time.
I think it represents an opportunity to be heard and an opportunity to make a difference. This theme is about using those seats effectively to improve how everyone is listening to women in leadership.
It's not just the seat, it's also the voice and the ability to make the decisions.
And where everybody feels not only included at the table, but empowered to speak once they're at the table.
Making room for women in leadership means inspiring women to fly with both wings and to pursue their passion.
As we become more diverse and inclusive, even my daughters don't think, there's nothing that they think they can't do. How do we make sure that it continues?
It always makes me think of that quote by Shirley Chisholm, where she says, you know, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair.
I think of my 3 girls and how grateful I am and proud to know so many really talented, strong, and empathetic women who are paving the way for them.
If I could sum it up in one word, it means progress. And if I can be frank, women are just smarter than men.
I don't know if I saw Demik here today, but okay. Well, let's go ahead and get to the main event, which is our panel conversation, and I'll introduce our moderator for our panel, Mr. Robert Shea, one of my fellow partners here. Robert, come on up here. You might wonder, what qualifies this man for this job?
I'm waiting.
Well, I have the pleasure to know Robert's 3 daughters and his wife, Eva, and they're all great people, despite Robert. But
yes, I knew this was going to be a great introduction.
Yes. But
I'm vulnerable right now.
You look a little vulnerable. Robert is a welcome addition to the group here. We need diversity on our panels as well. And like I said, Robert is a wonderful advocate for women, and including it within his own family every day. So thank you for being here, and I'll let you introduce the panelists.
Thank you very much. Let me invite our panelists up. Thank you all very much for being here. Greg, thank you for that great introduction to our morning. It was great to see the video of Barbara Bush. Those of you who know me know I won't miss a chance to name drop. But I got to know Barbara Bush. I grew up in Houston, Texas, where she was a legend, but I found myself on her advance team in 1988 in New Hampshire. So I was driving around with her in the frigid, cold winter, trying to help get her husband elected president. And I was just some little grunt, making sure that she had everything she needed, that there were a bunch of signs when she got everywhere. And when I got back to school, in the mailbox, there was a note that I happened to fish out when she died on Wednesday. A beautiful note thanking me for making her look good in New Hampshire. And it reminded me of, and I know this will embarrass her, but Wendy Morton Huddleston. This is a trait that she possesses. So those of you who've been involved in this event will get a gift and or a note from Wendy, and it will remind you of what you contributed, but also what a special person she is. So she shares joy, she reminds you you're important, makes sure that everyone is recognized for the contributions they make to whatever enterprise it is she's involved. So again, Wendy, thank you very much for your leadership of today and every day. All right, so I sucked up to the organizer. Thank you. I got my to-do list that my daughters wrote for me. So we have Rosie Allen Herring, the President and Chief Executive Officer of United Way National Capital Area. Kim Drumgo, Director of Diversity and Conclusion at the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants. And we can talk to you about our CPAs today. Okay, great. Little accounting firm joke. And Brianne Nadeau, a member of the Council of the District of Columbia. Thank you all very much for being here. I owe you an enormous apology. We had a logistical problem. This is all about the seat at the table, and the least we could have done was had a table for you here. So let's just pretend there's a table. All of you made it to the table, but precious few women are at corporate tables across America. Talk about that and what lessons you would share about what anyone can do, whether they're at the table, whether they're not at the table, trying to get to the table, to make sure that the table's an inclusive one. And I'll let anybody start.
I'm happy to.
Great.
Sure. So I'm going to bring the political and government perspective to this panel. Let me just ask, how many of you have ever considered running for office? All right. But see how few that is. I counted 4 hands. And that's part of our problem, is that it takes about 7 times for you to ask a woman to run, for her to actually agree to do it. So let this be the first time that I've asked. You all are here because you are smart and plugged in and engaged and have something to offer, which means that you should be running for office. Women often don't run for so many reasons. It's hard to balance everything. I'm a new mom, so I have a 7-month-old at home. I made news last year for pumping on the dais while chairing a legislative hearing. And, you know...
Not breastfeeding, pumping.
Pumping, yeah, because, I mean, like the breastfeeding people are like, ooh, the baby's there, right? They get excited about that. Pumping is just purely operational. It's not like, you know, it's like...
That's good.
Correct. A friend of mine who also
there
had a
a plug
baby.
here?
No, but it's the first thing I look for now is where's the plug. So a friend of mine who also had a baby around the same time as me called and said, so I've got a board meeting I'm chairing and I think I need to nurse during the board meeting, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that statement. And I said, no, hon, that's not making a statement, that's making it work, right? You just do what you have to do as a new mom. So there are women out there who think, how can I do all the things I want to do in life and run for office? Or they don't want to deal with the nasty side of politics, right? But the number one thing that holds women back is they don't think that they're ready. Now, we've never had a better example of a male politician who did not have what it takes, but decided to run anyway, and then won. And
So
I don't
that
think
took
I
about
need to say his
43
name.
seconds to get into the. Nice. I had one job. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Council Member.
So point being, yeah, well, it's all right. That's why they put people like me on the panel, because I'll just say it, right?
No.
So in any case, the point is that men don't feel the same way about running that women do. Men feel like, of course they should run. Women feel like, I'm not ready yet. So what I always tell women is you inherently have the skills you need to be a good representative of others because of what you do as a woman every day. You don't have to be a mom to have the skills to be a representative. I wasn't one when I first ran for a neighborhood commission in 2006. But women don't believe in themselves in the same way that men do. And that's part of our challenge. And that's why I do a lot of work in the community to lift women up and to convince them to run as well.
Great.
So I've been asked to run once, now twice. So
I get you one more time
I'm almost 50. So I think I'm running out of time.
No,
but
you're not.
So, I often think about women at the table when I think about the movie Hidden Figures, right? And how Catherine needed to be at the table. She wasn't even in the room. And so she needed to be in the room, and she talked with her boss, who was played by Kevin Costner, and said, how am I supposed to get this man to the moon if I'm not even in the room where they're talking about the technology and the work that they needed to do to get him there? And so he said, well, it's not customary. It's not a part of procedure. And she said, well, you're the boss. You can change the procedure, right? And she really, that was a defining moment for all women, right? She gave him the authority to make the decision to allow the woman to get into the room, right? She gave him the authority, but she was the lower employee. And so I think that's what we need to continue to do. That's a really good example of making sure that we expect to be at the table, not trying to get a seat at the table, pulling up your chair. No, I expect this, and that's what I tell my daughter. She can do it, and you should expect to be at the table. And I think men expect for us to be at the table. I think it's culture. I think it's policy. I think it's what we've done in the past continues to be translated into what we're doing today. And so a part of that is changing our mindset and expecting to see different people at the table. And when we don't see different people at the table, then that's that's the red flag that comes up. If we see all women at the table, that should be a red flag. If we see all men at the table, that should be the red flag that we need to make a difference. And I could quote many, many different studies that are out there that say, if you have a diverse team, it makes you smarter, it makes you brighter, you come up with different decisions. And the reason why that is because when we're not all the same, we're not all coming from the same place, we tend to challenge each other. We tend to say, well, why is that? And we have this sense of, I really want to understand. And that's not to challenge to belittle, but it's challenge to understand. And when we begin to challenge each other in different ways because we've come from different backgrounds and we have different perspectives, we're really able to come to a better decision. And so that's really one of the key business cases that I talk about in terms of diversity and having diversity around the table in gender, ethnicity, race, abilities, you name it. It's just really, really important to have that different composition around the table. So that's where I would say it's really important for us.
Rosie?
Well, I go back to somewhat of the original question you were asking, why aren't women at the table? And I think that it's institutional that women haven't traditionally been at the table. I think it's the elephant in the room. We're not at the table because we've never been at the table, and now we're just beginning to get to the table. So in the last perhaps 40, 50 years in our lifetime, have women begin to emerge and be at the table. So when you have hundreds of years of women not being at the table and not being decision makers, you can't overnight equate yourself to a history that hadn't allowed you to be at the table. But now that we know better, we do better. So when you now look at where we are and what we have and what we bring to the table, it's really becoming innate for us to be at the table. And so when you find yourself in those situations where it's not equitable, when it's not clear, then that is when you ask the question, why not? And so that is how we become better. So I think that the question of why we're not at the table, I think we know why. The question is, what do you do now that you are at the table? And that's where I said, even in the video, when you're at the table, you make certain you bring substance to the table so that the person who comes behind you won't have to deal with what you left there, especially if it's not something good. But also, as a person at the table, when you know, because you know you don't have all the answers, you know everything does not start and stop with you. If you know you can't do it alone, then bring someone else with you. It's simple. There's power in numbers. There is something about having diversity in thought, gender, and perspective and ability, because it does make you smarter. It makes us all smarter. So the minute we understand, and assuming positive intent, that we are here to really make things better, and you can't do it alone, then it becomes almost, just thoughtless to think otherwise, that you should be able to be at a table by yourself. No one is going to solve all of the challenges that are out there, business, community, civic, with it being just one monolithic thought thought pattern there. So I believe historically, you break the barriers, you know you've broken them, you do better, you bring others along, and you make sure that you bring substance to the table.
So we talked theoretically about what it takes. Is it, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you share an example of a difficult barrier and how you confronted it to get where you are? Was there a conversation you had to have? Was there an action you had to take to dissolve an unfair barrier that was in your way? I'm going to take about a 5-minute break for y'all to think about this.
I mean, I think for me, before going to United Way 4 years ago, I spent 21 years at Fannie Mae. So my background is corporate finance, and it's a very male-dominated role when you're looking at doing, debt and equity deals and the like, and dealing with the markets. And so I had an employee at one time who was a member of my team that made an error that cost the company a lot of money. That's how I met the general counsel, and I met the investor relations group, because that person closed the pool like 20 years before it was supposed to be closed, and we had a problem. And I remember my boss at the time, when I went in to talk about it, and of course, you bring a resolution to the table, you never bring problems. He said to me, okay, so when is that person's last day? And I remember almost freezing just a little bit. And I said, I'm not gonna fire him. And he looked at me like, what planet are you on? The person, who's not a senior level person, made an error that cost this company millions of dollars, literally overnight in a sweep, with the markets, and having to get something back open. It was a nightmare. But I said, you don't understand. That is the most expensive lesson that we have learned as a company. So not only am I sure that individual won't make that mistake, I'm sure no one else will make that mistake, but it's also helped us bulletproof our systems to not allow a person to be able to make that kind of mistake in our company again. There was some back and forth, but I won because I said, this is my decision. And if you trust me to fix this, then you have to trust my solution. And he said, okay. But there was some back and forth. that made me at one of those moments think about, Rosie, are you about to get fired yourself? Because if you won't do it, then he will obviously find someone who will gladly say, I'll escort you all out. But that was a moment for me that was telling. And it helped me sort of kind of think about my decisions. And I'll share one more, and then I know we have to go for time. I had a mentor who was the highest ranking woman in the company. And when I was looking at another position, she said, oh no, don't do that, too insular. And she told me about her story of being a young lawyer, working in the firm, and she said she was working so hard, and the guys weren't working nearly as hard. And the partners would come around and sort of kind of pat them on the shoulder. They knew to get up and come walk with them. They would take them out to golf. They were clearly on the partner track, and she was there doing all the work. And she said, I did the unthinkable. And I'm like, what's the unthinkable? She said, I exploded. And I said to them, hey, I've been over here working. No one has noticed me. Nobody's tapping me on the shoulder. Nobody's asking me, telling me that I'm on the track. And they said to her, well, we didn't know what you wanted. And she said, you'll never not know again. So I've learned to never not let people know what your intentions are.
You'll never not know again. That's powerful.
I started my career in technology. So I have my PMP. I manage large projects implementing database servers, and I worked with a lot of men prior to getting into this role in the D&I space.
You are the prototypical techie.
Yeah. And I was the only one. I was the only African-American woman in this team of about 50 programmers and project managers and technical analysts, and there were other women, but I was the only African-American woman and a leader in that position. And so I was in a situation where I was in a room full of programmers, very diverse programmers, some from India, one from Africa, white men. We had, a really good, ethnically diverse team, geographically diverse team, and I was the project manager giving direction, asking for dates, and when would your script be ready? Because we can't run the script unless we have, or we can't upload the server unless we have the script. You guys know the technical jargon that I'm talking about. And so this one gentleman just said, we'll get it to you later, sweetie. I was like, so, I let it go. I was like, okay, I'll call him Mark. Okay, Mark.
Mark?
Yeah. I said, so I'm going to need this by this date, correct? And I said, this date. And does everyone agree? He was like, yeah. He said yes, and everyone said, yes, we can do that. The time comes by, and he doesn't have the script ready. Well, Kim, don't you worry your pretty little head over this. And so I said, Mark. So
did you call him sweetie? I still want you to call him sweetie.
I said,
Mark, sweetie.
No, here's what I said, Mark, bless your heart. But I don't,
Southern.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I don't like to be referred to as pretty little head or sweetie or, you'll get it to me whenever you can get it to me. I am the project manager, and you will get me this script by this period of time. And so that was strike two, right? He didn't get it to me. So now we're in the big meeting, and he still doesn't have the script. And I was very polite, as my mother has taught me as a Southern woman, but I said very clearly, I hope this isn't a situation where you feel like, because I'm a woman, you don't have to get me the data that I need. Right? And all the other men in the room kind of just like sunk down in there. And so I said, I don't appreciate the way that you're treating me or the way that you're communicating with me. I expect that you will have this to me right away. And, we had a couple of other words, and, by the end of the meeting, he was on his computer, and I had the script ready to go. But what that did, I had a couple of the men come to me after that and say, I'm sorry that happened to you. this has really opened my eyes about how you're the only one, and you had to really stand up and defend yourself and defend your position to make sure that you were getting what you needed. Mark later came by and said, I really had no idea. I had no idea that you were being perceived, that you perceived the situation to be like this. And so that was a turning point for me, in that I needed to make sure that this never happened to anyone like me again. So it was a year and a half later that the company asked me to lead their diversity and inclusion initiatives. And it wasn't because of Mark, bless his heart, but it was because of I saw something very, very clearly that no one else in that department saw. And the company knew that I could do this. I knew that I could do this. Until this day, Mark will call me when he has a diversity issue with some of the foreign nationals that they're working with. Mark is now a good friend of mine, right? And so it's having that ability and being at the table and having the ability to coach people to do the right thing one by one. You're not going to do it in a big lecture hall, in a big training, but you will get to people one-on-one. And so I saw that as an opportunity for me to really just, make sure I'm using my position, using my knowledge and my skill to create less difficult positions for the women that follow. So.
Great story. Brianne?
Thank you.
Sorry, you have to follow that.
Oh, me too. Me too. So as a young woman, I am not as young as I was when I first ran, but I'm still considered a young woman, I think, in my late 30s. I have had so many doors opened for me by the generation that came before me in politics. And so I just want to start with that and offer that gratitude into the universe of so many women who fought incredibly hard to be at the table in government and politics. When I ran for council, I was running against a 4-term incumbent, an older man who had been in the seat for 16 years, and I knew that if I was going to win, I would have to work incredibly hard, smart, calmly, patiently, and be very determined. And I knew that I would have to spend a lot of time doing the work. So I actually ran for that seat for 3.5 years. I'm up for my first re-election now, and I have 3 challengers, and it's a totally different conversation. But the 3.5 years that I ran against my predecessor, I had people saying things like, oh, sure, hun, it's a good thing for you to get your name out because, when he retires, then you'll have the name recognition, right? And, of course, in my heart, I knew myself. I knew that I was not running to get my name out. I was running to win. And I was running to win because I believed that the people in my ward, in Ward 1, deserved better representation. And Ward 1, by the way, is the most diverse ward in the District of Columbia. It includes U Street, Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant, Columbia Heights, Pleasant Plains, Parkview, Howard, LaDroit, and a little bit of Shaw. And so...
To be precise.
She
knows her district.
I don't want to leave anyone out. Exactly. Especially if there are constituents in the room. But point being that I was the first woman to take the seat. I was the first woman who won. And the ward had only been represented by men, and now I'm the first young mom to represent the ward. I was actually the first council member to give birth while in office, and now, of course, Tammy Duckworth has totally upstaged me, so okay. But it was a tough race, and I got used to being underestimated. And I realized along the way, and when I won, that was actually a really good tool for me. And it's something that, it's not that I choose, it's not like I don't go out and say, oh, I'm gonna act like less of who I am, right? I always bring my full self into the room, into the table, and I had mentors along the way who taught me how important it was to say what you wanted, because if you don't ask, they can't say yes, right? So I was out asking voters to say yes to me. And now in this job, we have fewer women on the DC Council now than we've had historically, and that's a sad thing because I've seen when we have more women on the council, we work on really important issues. I was the one who brought street harassment to the DC Council, and now we're poised to pass a law that would solve that problem through education and training. Last year, we passed universal paid family leave through the strong efforts of one of my female colleagues that I was happy to join in. And so I still find myself in a room of people who are surprised sometimes when I have the solution or come up with the idea. So this theme of being underestimated is a really interesting one. And it's one that I've used to my advantage largely, but it's probably not a good thing on the whole, right? I mean, I think we should expect women to come to the table with solutions and with ideas. I recently explained to a leader in government the concept of mansplaining. And I did it
What's
because,
that?
right.
Just kidding.
So I did it
have 3
because I
daughters,
thought it was important for him to understand it and the phenomenon among my colleagues who, you know, I think mostly when men, to define the term, when men explain something to women in a way that is really demeaning or patronizing, they don't always realize they're doing it. It seems to be sort of a learned behavior that's hard to unlearn. Yeah, it's what Mark was doing, exactly. But if you name it, you can change it. And so I feel a little bit like a warrior day to day on all of these issues, and it gets tiring, but it's really important. And the reason that I do it is that I don't want other women to have to, right? So when I'm pumping on the dais, for me it's not because I'm trying to make a point. It's because I want any woman who works in the building to feel like they can do what they have to do to feed their child. To feel like the jobs that we have in government are jobs that allow you to find a work-life balance. And so, you know, back in 2014 when I was running, the big obstacle was this guy who was coming at me in every debate, attacking me and being demeaning and accusing me of breaking the law and, you know, all these terrible things. And you know, the kind of things that make women not want to run for office, right? Not wanting to get dragged through the mud. But I knew at the end of the day that voters are not stupid, that voters can see through that sort of rhetoric, and that if I could remain cool, calm, and collected, as my chief of staff calls it, fighting fire with water, that I would come out on top. And so, you know, the hard work paid off. But I will come back to my original point, which is I never could have been in that position to just go forward with hard work and get it done if all these other barriers had not been kicked out of my way and the women who came before me kicking down doors. So.
Great. I'll try to keep my questions really short after that. So following up on that, can you share with us, Greg asked us to share who a woman leader is that sort of modeled the way for us. Can you share the woman that you talked about?
Yeah, I certainly can. And I hope she's watching out there. Claire Russo is a new executive vice president at the AICPA. And Claire has this ability to tap people very quietly in our organization, pull them to the side and say, hey, you do this really well. They're talking about you for this role, so you may want to beef up your conversation around X, Y, and Z. And she's done this for several women in the organization, and she's a huge supporter of, you know, women, of course, but then she has, you know, she diversifies her crew, right? She has a very diverse crew. And so I look at Claire as someone who has this political savviness to assist people and usher them through different levels in the organization, but also has the presence and that seat at the top table to make sure that you're represented well and to speak well on your behalf. So she's that sponsor person that we always talk about, have a mentor and a sponsor. Claire is definitely that person. And I joke with her, I'm like, it's almost stealth-like, the way that you move through the organization and assist people, especially women, making sure that they have the skills and the resources and the tools, as well as that voice to get to that next level. So Claire was my person.
Rosie?
Mine was a little bit different, and Robert and I ended up sitting next to each other. So there are any number of women who have been supportive of me and have seen things in me that I didn't see myself in terms of being able to move through the corporate ladder. But the person that I thought of, and perhaps it was off the heels of the Barbara Bush video, was my mother. My mother, I am the youngest of 10 children from the Delta in Mississippi. And so my mother is now 95 years old. So yes, I was a change of life baby. I'm not that old. But when I think about being the youngest of 10, and it was a group of overachievers, my oldest sister, who was number 1, went to college at 15, went to law school at 19. She just retired as the first African-American Supreme Court Justice in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She was also the first African-American on the appeals court in Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so when that's number 1, and in between from 1 to 10, you got Harvard, you got a Columbia PhD, you have mathematics, magna cum laude. So it's kind of like when you get to number 10, it's kind of like, what are you going to do with your life? And so for me, because education was our equalizer, I came to Howard University and did not realize I was poor until I came to Howard, because I was never made to feel as though we were missing anything. Our parents my mother was educated, is educated, and while we always knew that we had something special, she always kept us humble. And so through her model of servant leadership, we learned to serve others. And you use your intellect for good. And so whenever you thought you were getting a little full of yourself, she'd always say, all book sense and no common sense still makes you stupid. And in that instance, you knew. And so all of us have taken that model and tried to do things to serve others. And so in doing so, I think we honor her and honor my father, who's no longer with us, but the way that she is now, I'm still scared of her. If we rolled her in here in that wheelchair, I'd be scared right now. But I say all of that to say we all have women in our lives who either we know directly or indirectly have influenced us. Whether they say something to you, tap you on the shoulder, tell you they believe in you, move stealthily to support you, or whether it's just someone you've watched from afar. The way they handled that situation, the way they have basically navigated, the way they look, outwardly, take those as models, whether they ever know your name or not. And then you can be that for someone else. So for me, it's my mother with a plethora of other women professionally who've helped, but it's also me trying to be that for my 2 daughters. And if they grow up to be, well, they are halfway grown, they're college girls, if they are confident in the decisions that they have to make as women, then my job is done.
Brianne.
So mine would be the woman I call my political godmother, Lynn French, who I came to know after I moved here, and whose daughter is now my chief of staff, actually, as it turns out. I kind of was welcomed into this longtime DC family. Lynn is a 7th-generation Washingtonian whose father was there at the Pettus Bridge, tending to people who'd been injured, who, as a rebel, moved to Chicago and joined the Black Panthers, and then became a single mom, went on to Harvard Law, and raised an incredible daughter who now advises me every day. But Lynn taking me into the fold actually changed my trajectory entirely, because, as a young white woman running to represent an incredibly diverse community, I really had a lot to prove. And the fact that she understood what was in my heart and was willing to share that with others and really help me build credibility in the community paved the way for me to be able to do this work. And to this day, I mean, you know how politics is. There's always someone going, pss, 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 right? And it's usually not good things they're whispering, right? So she's out there and just being my cheerleader, but also being my advocate, spokesperson, and bringing other people along, and has created this network of women and others who sort of circle the wagons for me when things get tough, and give me advice when my life experience doesn't provide the guidance I need. And I think that as an elected leader, it's all the more important to have people in my life who have more life experience than I do, have different life experience than I do, and can help me find my voice in a space where I am either struggling to find it or need to connect in exactly the right way. So I've always been grateful to her.
Great. I think it's time now to open it up to questions from the audience. So, and I think we've got some mics here. Can I invite someone from the audience to ask you all a question? Or I'll call on people. Any question? I really can't see anything because the light is blinding.
Well, I'll be loud enough.
That's right.
My name's Vinita. I work with RSM. In all your stories, I heard a lot of selflessness, a lot of what's in it for other people, no matter the realm of life you're in. And I moved to the country about 15 years ago. Throughout college, throughout my work life, I've met amazing people, but it's also been always driven by the bottom line. In fact, so much so that even the advocates of D&I have to prove to leaders how it affects the bottom line. So my question is, how do you let your selflessness, your giving, surface above all of that talk about money and just what affects financials over everything else?
Well,
if I think I understood your question, if you're looking for the why when you're trying to make the case for something, there's always, I call it, even though I work in the nonprofit sector now, it's still very corporate to me. Because when you're in the corporate sector, you're looking for the ROI. What's the return on the investment? And even in the nonprofit sector, what's the return on impact? How has someone's life been changed that has sometimes an intangible value? But when you're able to talk about it in terms of this is why we need someone to do something, this is why this action is required, and you're able to sort of kind of show them the path that you're going to get to a solution or get to success, most people are inspired by success, no matter what it looks like. So if you start with the end in mind and are able to share with them why this matters, then generally you'll get people to buy into what it is you're trying to do. But you got to give them a why.
I would agree with that. And we always talk about the business case for diversity and inclusion because when I started working in this field, I quickly realized that the color is not black or white, red or yellow, whatever color of the rainbow it is. The color is green. And for people to move in corporate, there's got to be a bottom line. And so we lead with that. But the foundation is about people. It's about making people feel welcomed and that they belong in the environment that they're working in. Because when they feel like they belong and they're in a place where they can be productive and succeed, that's when you get the best out of them. And that goes to the bottom line, right? And so there's the number side of it, and then there's the people side. And we lead with the numbers because that is very important to the organization. The color's green. But people have different needs in order to get there. And our job is to help our leaders understand that people have different needs to getting to that bottom line or to that green number, right? And so I was in an interview a couple of months ago, and they coined me as being a servant leader. And I said, oh, I guess I am, because I'm trying to pave the way for others to be successful. I may continue to be in this diversity job for the rest of my life. And I hope and I pray, and I've seen this, I've seen where we've opened up doors as diversity leaders so that others can succeed. And that's really why we're in this job, is to help others succeed. I'm a servant leader. I've been doing this servant leadership type of thing since I was a child, I believe, after they pointed that out to me. But it's all about being a servant leader to make sure that others are successful. And that's kind of where I come from when I do my job.
Brianne?
Sure. Well, government's a little different. I think, we're not good at ROI. We try to be.
We have a solution
with
for
partners
that.
like
we could sell you
Rosie.
on some consulting, do some modeling.
Yeah. I'm very data-driven, but I can't speak for everyone. So let me just say this. I was a Girl Scout my entire childhood. Yeah. Right on. And what I learned in Girl Scouting was to look for work and to leave things better than I found them, and that's still what I bring to the job with me every single day. And what I try to do is ensure that every penny of tax dollars we spend is spent wisely and that it helps somebody. I'm chair of the Human Services Committee. I had a very tough job last year reforming our emergency homeless services system. And what I know from doing this work is that you have to have a heart, but you also have to really focus in on using resources wisely. And reforming an emergency homeless system has never been done in this country. There are a few jurisdictions that have a right to shelter, like the District of Columbia, but we are the only one that has ever successfully reformed one, and that's because the mayor and I worked together and got it done. But it was hard, because whenever you talk about changing an entitlement, making any changes, people always assume that you're going to be taking something away. And there is nothing I could say that convinced them otherwise. So sometimes you have to be tough in order to do what's right for everybody. And in this case, we wanted to ensure that our homeless services system didn't totally collapse. And so, being a good steward of our tax dollar, but also looking out for those in need is part of my job day to day.
Oh, another question.
Hi, I'm Elena Berkshire. I'm a leader in the federal government and also with AGA DC. My question is sort of a follow-on of some of the things that we've been talking about, and I think most of us in the room know how important it is to have a sponsor and an advocate. What advice would you give to women about being their own advocate in times where, like you were saying, in the government, the color is a little less green, and then also in the corporate world, it is important to advocate for yourself at times. So what advice do you have about that?
Well, I'll be, advocating for yourself is doing your best at whatever it is that you choose to do. And having the confidence, which generally, we've talked about at the outset, women traditionally have not demonstrated the confidence, even though we knew we were changing and rocking the world. Being able to speak about it in a way that's unapologetic. It's like you can't be apologetic for having the answer. Just have the answer. And so I think that, if you've ever read Carla Harris's book, Carla Harris is on Wall Street with Morgan Stanley, been there for over 25 years. She's a great friend, and she has a book called Carla's Pearls, You Expect to Win. And in the book, she talks about having the mentor, the sponsor, and the advisor, and what the difference is, and there are distinct differences in them. We all need people, so someone else has to know how great you are besides you, and then hold them accountable for being able to help, because people will say, yeah, I help you, but when they get behind closed doors, where's the integrity? You can't control that integrity, but what you can control is what you bring to the table. And being able to talk about your work in a way that no one else can talk about it, then I think that sets you up to be your own best advocate, with hopefully a little bit of help from someone else who sees what you already know and what you've been able to do as well. I won't lie to you to say that you can be your own advocate and literally change your own trajectory, because you're never in the room when decisions are made about you. Every decision that is made about you is made when you are not in the room. So what you have to do is make certain that you have enough advocates around you, not all black women, because you're not going to bum rush the board meeting and say, this is what we're going to do. Not all white women, not all white men. You need advocates that are literally going to be as diverse as the company is, in order to be able to see themselves in you and see you at the table to the point where they believe you belong. And that's how the decisions are made.
Now, Rosie, I know you've got to steal away, so we'll excuse you at your convenience.
Nope, I will take it up on it now.
All right, thank you, Rosie,
Please,
very
my
much for
apologies.
being here. You're an inspiration. Thank you.
So building on what Rosie was saying.
See how she did that? She got her own special.
Yeah, that was good.
That's pretty good.
Maybe I'll go now. I think of it as what she's talking about is you're not always your own best advocate, right? You need a credible messenger. So thinking about who around you can help you advocate, especially when you're not in the room. I agree with that completely. That's a little bit what I was talking about with Lynn and my network of women now is I don't want to always be the one out there saying, you know, I did this or I'm the best at this. You want other people to be saying that, right? And you should be thinking about who you can do that for also, right? You build this network of women and you move up together. You know, it's no different, in that sense, it's no different in politics than it is in the business world. But what I always talk to young women about when I'm encouraging them to run for office is how important it is to be a good listener. When you close your mouth and listen, it's amazing what you can hear. When you stop thinking about the next thing you're going to say, it's amazing what you can hear. And when you hear what other people are saying, that informs you about how you should be talking to them about the things that you care about and how you can relate to the things they care about, right? Because everybody's in it for themselves in most of these environments, and you have to know what moves the person that you're trying to move. So I think that's really important. Listening is the most important part of my job. And then, of course, just always being prepared. Right? I carry an iPad with me that has a memo for everything I do all day long because I never want to miss an opportunity. I don't want to be so busy that I'm in a meeting with somebody, haven't had a chance to think about it and miss the chance to mention something that they might care about or that I want to connect with them on. And because that's the kind of day I have where I'm running from thing to thing. So I'm lucky because I have a team of people that helps me prepare. But before I did, I made sure that I took the time before every meeting I had, every sit down, so that I would know about the people that I was meeting with and what they cared about. I think it's huge. Women, we have to take on the responsibility of being more prepared than anyone else in the room. That's what's going to make us better at what we do.
So I'm going to talk about both of the things that my panelists talked about. And it was about sponsorship. So definitely having a sponsor, I think that's important. Definitely being prepared. And I'll share this story with you. I just acquired a new employee who does a lot of good work. And I'd heard that she had done a lot of good work. And so I sat down with her and I said, so tell me about what you're doing. And so she talks for about 30 minutes of all of the projects that she's been working on and all of the accomplishments that she's made for this last year. And after the conversation, I'm like, so where have you documented any of this? Where have you put this on paper so that when someone asks, what do? You can just shoot it to them and say, this is what I do. This is what I've accomplished. She was like, well, I didn't do that. I was like, you don't do status reports or any of that? She was like, no one's ever asked me to. I was like, well, I'm asking you to. I'm asking you to document everything that you've done because it does a couple of things. It helps you reflect on how successful you are, and then it helps everyone else reflect on how successful you've been, right? And so in just that one statement, she was like, I never ever thought to do that. And like, we've got to, it's different than a resume. It's different than a status report. It's your list of accomplishments. And that is a reminder of how successful you are and what you can do and what you're capable of. Your resume just talks about, your experience. This is like your accolades. This is how you toot your own horn. And when you continue to read that over and over again, you then become your advocate because you can say it at the drop of a dime because you're producing it, you're writing it, you're sending it to people. That's one way that you can continue to advocate yourself. Often we forget, oh yeah, I remember I was on that project and I did that and I got that bid. Oh yeah, I remember when I did that. I was a part of helping make that decision, right? So we've got to make sure that we're documenting and reminding ourselves how great we are so that when it's time for us to talk about what we do, it's not, give me 5 minutes. Let me think about it. It just rolls off your tongue. And so that's really quick way to make sure that you're your own advocate so that when your sponsor says, hey, can you, run down real quick what you've been doing for the last 6 months? You can say, sure, here it is. You can send it right off to them. So I just think it's important that we reflect, document so that we can truly sit down and embrace what we've done I think about all of the positions that I've had, both in technology and in the diversity and inclusion space, and each of those stops has been very valuable. And I can list for you each of the things that I've learned and can take away and grow and build upon, as I'm going through my career. So I would just recommend doing that to ensure that you're your own advocate. Definitely leveraging the sponsors, the mentors, and the coaches, but you've got to be your own advocate. We have to be advocates of each other, and just continue to grow in that way.
Incredibly practical. A question over here.
Hey, Robert.
How are you, Mary?
Good, thank you.
Good,
Mary
thanks for
Peterman,
being
good
here.
morning. So first of all, my key takeaway from all of you is not the idea that you're taking a seat at the table, but that you're all building a bigger table. And that is exciting to me, because that is what servant leadership is, and that is what's going to move us forward. So thank you for that perception. My question, though, has to do with that undercurrent of sort of gender perception, gender bias. You tell us to be bold, to ask for what we want, to document our accomplishments and make sure that folks know them. I've been in that situation, as I'm sure many women in this room, where after you do something like that, they say, you know, Mary, you're a little bit more like strong coffee instead of sweet tea. And so... So how can we collectively, as a group, make it so that we don't have to overcome the perception that leads ahead of us in the room, to be able to speak boldly about what we want and what we want to accomplish collectively, no matter who we are, male, female, or whatever, without having that perception that I think probably the men in the room doing the same thing don't get?
I think about the stories of the women in the Obama administration who used to support each other around the table. One of them would speak up with an idea and the others would sort of chime in and echo support for it. And I think we need to be doing more of that. And the more women we have in the room, the easier it gets to do this. One of the things I was talking about earlier with the mansplaining, right, is if you have more women in the table, that effect sort of recedes. One of the things that I think we all struggle with, what you just named, is this idea that, and this is at the root of street harassment, by the way, the idea that the world expects us to shrink, as women shrink into the box that they want us to be in order to express ourselves or to get a point across or to achieve something. And for me, I've been in jobs where I had bosses that were kind of like, can you just be like a little less you for in the work, I have a big personality. I come from New York Jews. I like to gesture and we should never have an office culture that asks women to be small. One of the reasons that I wanted to take on street harassment, and I brought my male colleagues and sat in this round table where we had women come tell their stories for hours, was I wanted them to see the way that allowing harassment in public space makes women feel, but also girls. We had girls come testify as young as age 11 being harassed on the street, and the thing that they took away from that was, I shouldn't walk to school, or I shouldn't dress a certain way. When the answer is no, you should be able to be exactly who you want to be. We need to teach the men it's not okay to act that way. So it's about finding the male allies in the office. It's about bringing more women along. It's about filling that space with the energy and voices of women that are loud and boisterous and strong coffee instead of weak tea, and demonstrating the ROI on that, right? Demonstrating that when that happens, we all move forward in a way that is more authentic, that is more sustainable. And it's hard. I know it's hard in the moment because you're dealing with whichever colleague you are, but I would just encourage you to seek out others who may have either had that experience and can team up with you to express it to somebody higher up, or can join in the conversation. But I also would encourage you, and I've had to do this, and it's very tough. For example, when I explained to my colleague about mansplaining, he looked at me and he said, do I do it? And it was a tough moment for me. And I have to tell you, I chickened out. I said, well, sir. It is your job to explain things to us. And then I texted his wife and said, can you explain this to him when he gets home, please? You know what she said? Oh, I just tell him to shut up. But she can do that, right? So it's tough, right? I'm not going to tell you that I'm the warrior out there and I never have a moment where it's hard. But you keep trying. You keep pushing. You do it in a way that's comfortable for you, but you also have those conversations when you can, like with Mark, where you say, hey, can we just reflect on this conversation we had the other day where you said this thing? I want you to know how it made me feel. You don't have to be strong coffee. You can be weak tea in the moment. I want you to know how it made me feel. I've found that making myself vulnerable has actually helped a lot in these situations too. Being able to talk about your feelings. And you know, of course, there's the stereotype. Women are all about feelings and emotions, right? But guess what? We can use that to our advantage. So
I have a mentor who always reflects on the sweet tea thing, and she says she doesn't take any sugar or honey in her tea. So you can use, I love that. I love that acronym. So anywho, stereotype, I think, is what we're talking about. Stereotypes of women and how women should behave in the workplace. And, you know, Claude Steele, if any guys have heard of Claude Steele, he wrote this book called Whistling Vivaldi. And the book is about stereotype threats. And he opens with a gentleman, a football player, walking down the street and noticing big, large black male in Connecticut walking down the street. He noticed that every time a white couple would come towards him, they would cross the street and keep walking. So eventually he started whistling Vivaldi as he was walking down the street. So he's walking down the street whistling Vivaldi, and he noticed that they didn't cross the street when he was whistling Vivaldi, right? And it was because he was debunking the stereotype of the large black male, right? So the study that Claude Steele has done for many, many years is focused on the stereotype threat that we possess in ourselves. So as women, we know the stereotypes. We know that we can't be, you know, the B word in the room, or we can't be bold and we can't be outspoken, or we will be called the B word, right? You know, black women have the stereotype of the angry black woman, and we have to counter that stereotype by doing different things. That's the stereotype threat that we're faced with every single day, and that stereotype threat gets in the way of our performance, and it gets in the way of our productivity, and when we hear it reflected back on us, it then chips away more at our productivity and the way that we behave in the workplace. And so with that stereotype threat, his goal is to really expose that and to put it out on the table and to say, you know, are you operating under a stereotype threat, or are you operating off of something that's true? Are you operating off of something that, you know, everyone else is thinking about you, and how you can debunk that, and really ways that you can tell yourself, you know, this person is saying, can you be not so bold? It's none of, what does it have to do with you? This is who I am, and we're not, you know, as people, we don't want to change who we are. That has made us successful in what we're doing. If you're passionate about your job, be passionate about it. Don't tell me not to be so passionate about my job, right? That's to your advantage. So it's really about how we can take these stereotypes that are reflected on us, unpack them, and try to shed them in some way, right? Even when someone's coming back to you and saying, wow, you're really too loud in that meeting, or you got way too passionate, you know, how do we, you know, just make sure we're debunking those stereotypes? And it's not just women. It's not just, you know, black men or black women. It's white men too. I'm sure you have stereotypes. Everyone has a stereotype that they're in a situation where they're like, is this stereotype being applied to me? And you're uncomfortable. And you have to take a step back and say, I hope they're not thinking the stereotype that's out there about me, right? And so we all have to really think about how that impacts us, and then think about how it might be impacting someone else, because we all experience it. And we do need to unpack that, and we do need to shift our thinking to let people be who they are, and try to find that golden nugget, of productivity, of excellence, of, where that person has, that passion, leverage that. And so that's what I would just say to, the people who are trying to tell you not to be bold. Really unpack that in yourself and have that conversation with them.
So we're out of time for questions.
Man.
But, sitting through these the last several years, it's hard to believe you can top the previous one. But your practical, insightful, and empathetic sharing has done that. So I know you're busy. Thanks for helping all of us learn a lot today.
Thank you for
from
having
your
us.
experiences.
And
thanks to you guys.
Just one last plug that everybody out here should be thinking about running for office, and call me when you're ready.
Thank you both very much. I have the privilege of introducing Megan Duffy and Gina Oliva, our co-chairs, to wrap us up. Thank you very much.
Good morning and good afternoon for all those. We're probably in different time zones or webcasting live. I really want to take the time to really thank everyone in this room, but also our panelists. Like my shirt says, we have some fearless females as our panelists and the women in this room. So I really want to take the time to thank not only Grant Thornton, our leadership, our sponsors, but everyone in this room. Every year, we're on our 12th annual, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger because of the people in this room. So please keep spreading the word, because every year we're going to try to keep the bar going higher and higher for this event. And as a form of our appreciation to our panelists, we're actually making a small donation to Washington Area Women's Foundation that mobilizes a community to ensure that economically vulnerable women have resources to thrive. So thank you.
We hope you leave here today feeling empowered to return to your organizations and make sure that women do have a seat at the table. A few housekeeping notes. Dr. Sheila Robinson from Diversity Magazine has provided copies of the magazine for those in attendance today, so please feel free to take one if you have not done so already on your way out. For CPEs, for external guests today, it'll take up to 3 months. They will be emailed to the email that you registered for the event. So please be patient with us. If you do not receive one within 3 months, please feel free to reach out to us. We are going to have a networking event after. It'll be in the same room that we started the day with. We have chocolate-covered strawberries and granola and drinks, so please stay and just share what you have learned today. One last thing that I wanted to leave everybody with is a quote that has just resonated with me really well. I heard it recently at the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce Women's Leadership Conference, and she quoted, "We will be the CEO that our parents wanted us to marry." So thank you again to everyone that came out and to everyone that has joined us on the webcast, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
One last thing we forgot to thank our team. We are standing here as co-chairs, but I will tell you that I cannot tell how many people from Melissa Hadley, she just tweeted about where she got the inspiration for our, so everyone go to Twitter, her inspiration for our theme, to our marketing team, to everyone that has even one email for this event. We really thank you from the bottom of our hearts, because we could not do this without you. So thank you, team. Time to network.